Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.
Don't you know we're gonna have a solar?
Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back for the number 36, the double high election protection green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition, or GREEP. We are on the Progressive Radio Network. This is the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness slot that runs Thursdays at 5 p.m. Glad for you to join us, please. We've been having a steady audience of people on PRN listening to this, and we appreciate it. We're going to go an hour and a half. So the first hour, you'll be with us from 5 to 6 Eastern time on PRN. And if you want to jump off then and join us for the second half hour, or the third half hour, actually, go to Grassroots Election Protection, grassrootsep.org, or Election Protection 2024. We have a pretty joyous session today. I mean, it's a really auspicious day. We have Danny Paul Nelson from the Indigenous community. We're celebrating Joe Biden's announcement of the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline. Danny Paul, great work on that. That's, you know, the Keystone Pipeline has been the site of some of the greatest confrontations in American history, really, in terms of grassroots environmental protection. And if Joe Biden is going to cancel that thing, that's great. We hope the Dakota Pipeline will follow soon thereafter. We are just a couple of days away from hopefully the safe inauguration of an actual president of the United States. We haven't had one for 4 years. What a concept. May actually do something about the COVID virus that has now killed a mere 300,000 Americans, for God's sakes. But this was getting closer to 4, I guess, Lynn. But the bottom line on this call is that our focus is on election protection. And we are looking forward to such things as the statehood for Washington, D.C., and maybe for Puerto Rico. We want universal hand-counted, hand-marked, scanned paper ballots. We want money out of politics. We want gerrymandering done away with, which is what we're going to start with, and also, of course, the demise of the election, the Electoral College. All of these are within grasp. I mean, we started in some pretty dark days back in the spring of 2020. That is behind us, thankfully. We also have a major piece of legislation we're going to discuss today, House Bill 1, about election protection. And we're also joined by RAY MCCLENDON of the Atlanta NAACP, who helped lay down an incredibly successful template for changing electoral politics, as we saw with the special double runoff that was victorious in Georgia. Now, we are technically nonpartisan. What was really great about the double runoff in Georgia, actually it was a triple, and I want to get the guy who ran for Daniel Blackman, who ran for Public Service Commission, to join us next week. But the turnout for an off-year election in Georgia was unprecedented. And RAY MCCLENDON and the Atlanta NAACP had a lot to do with that. And we are going to talk to him shortly. We're going to start today. We're going to go through gerrymandering, and especially a victory, huge victory that nobody's been talking about. There was one in Michigan in 2018 to get a statewide districting commission that's actually nonpartisan. Then we're going to talk about Georgia. We're going to talk also about some voting machines in New York, where a decision is pending. Then we'll talk about the House Bill 1, and then we'll talk about the what's going on in the country. Everybody's got a ton to say, and you'll be able to vent the incredible uprising or downrising and the lack thereof that happened over the weekend, where we thought we were going to have thousands of armed fascists turn up at the state houses, and they didn't, which I think is a major step forward. And that includes Michigan, of course. So let's start with Jan BENDOR, who's somewhere near Ann Arbor. We had her on last week talking about the basic election in Michigan. This time, we want to talk about the incredibly important precedent-setting victory in Michigan, won by grassroots activists to install a nonpartisan districting commission, which gets us past gerrymandering. So Jan, you are one of our truly great grassroots activists. Your impact on the 2020 election in Michigan was quite tangible, as was Ray's in Georgia. So tell us what happened with gerrymandering in Michigan and how we can use it as a template to move forward for the rest of the country.
Well, thank you, Harvey. Our story is one of long-term planning. You can't do some of these major changes without some pretty far thinking. My organization, the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, which was formed in 2004, has been working on a lot of these issues, including getting rid of gerrymandering. And we knew we were one of the worst gerrymandered states. And we especially knew that after 2010, when the Republicans took over our state legislature. And in 2011, they locked it up for a permanent hegemony for their party, which wasn't very fair. So we knew we had to do something about that. And we've always been very privileged in our state that in the 1900s, we had some great progressive activists who set up some very populist features in our state constitution that included the right to change the constitution by popular proposal, the right to advance new legislation by popular proposal, the right to recall election officials by popular proposal. Not every state has that. And if you want to show the chart from the Institute, there are 26 states that have some form of the right of initiative and referendum. Not everybody has that. They really should, because this is the only way you can get around a deadlocked legislature and executive when nothing else is available. So we've had some success in the past in our state. We passed the 1978 bottle deposit law by citizen initiative. And we're one of the only states that still collects the money on the return bottles. And we have fewer bottles on our roadsides than anybody else. Well, we knew that worked. We've done it in a number of other areas. So after 2016, we realized, those of us who'd been working on election reform and election integrity reform, that we had to do something because 2016 was a mess. And at the end of November 2016, we got together and we formed kind of a bifurcated new organization made of the Michigan Election Reform Alliance and the Count My Vote group, which were a lot of very young activists who've been doing door knocking and trying to get people out to vote for the 2016 election. They were very frustrated, but we joined forces and we formed a new group called Voters, Not Politicians, which was, I think, one of the most brilliant campaign logos ever invented. Voters decide, not the politicians, what the lines will be in the districts. And it was a very tough haul. We had to assemble a huge number of people, of lots of talents. We had about 50 lawyers who got together and came up with the language for our proposal. And you can see that on our Constitution website that I provided, if you can provide that to people to see what the language was.
Jan, on the website, a Grassroots EP or Election Protection 2024, we have posted the link to the table of the 26 states in the United States that have referendum and initiative.
Yep.
And also, we've posted the language that established the actual commission that you want. So anybody want to see those, both of those, go to the website.
That's in our Constitution now, as of the 2018 vote. So we got it on the ballot, and then we had to fight about a dozen lawsuits that were aimed at taking our proposal off the ballot. The Michigan, Chamber of Commerce was leading the way to take us off, as were most of the, undemocratic groups, you can guess. But we managed to survive all these legal challenges. We spent an enormous amount of money on legal defense, but we managed to stay on the ballot. And when it came to the November 2018 election, we were extremely lucky because the #1 proposal on our ballot was, guess what? Legalizing recreational marijuana. Well, this is what you would call a wave election. Anybody who wants to pass anything should get those guys on the ballot. But we won, they won by 70%, we won by 61%. So it was a good thing. And so we have our new redistricting commission. It has a lot in common with the California redistricting commission. Some differences because our states are different. We had a lot of contact with the California redistricting commissioners. They came and talked to citizens in Michigan and said how well this will work. And as you see, if you read the language, our redistricting commission is very transparent. They are going all over the state with their proposed maps. They're getting comments from people. The whole idea is we want communities to be represented fairly, and not just because there's got to be some arbitrary line somewhere or somebody wants to pack or crack a district. And we had 10,000 people apply to be on the new commission. It would yeah, well, we encouraged a lot of applications. We went all over the state getting people to apply.
How many seats are there?
13. And the lots were drawn. We based this on the idea that you select a jury. A jury can decide a murder conviction. Why can't a jury decide the representation of citizens in the Congress? So it worked out really well. We have, as of last August, we have our new commission. There are four Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 people of no particular affiliation. We don't have an independent party in this state or the official category of independent. So you could be a Green or a natural law party or whatever you want in that category. So those 13 people have been meeting. They are waiting with bated breath for some kind of decent data out of the census, which is going to be a big problem because we know the census has been undermined and screwed up by the Trump administration. But as soon as they can get decent data, they are ready to run the maps and develop the maps. And then they're going to go around the state and have public meetings and ask people, is this the way you want your community to be grouped? How should we do this? By next August 21, those districts will be finalized. And then in 22, the new races will begin. And I predict it'll be a very different state legislature. It'll be a very different congressional delegation from the state of Michigan than anyone has seen in a long time. The transparency is really important to us. People have not trusted government for way too long. We've said from the beginning, this is a nonpartisan effort. We took no partisan money for the whole campaign. We got on the ballot with Only small donations from individuals, about $300,000. It was unprecedented for a campaign, grassroots campaign. Any citizen right now can submit a map and ask that the commission consider their map. So this is right now an ongoing process. Once these district lines are established, then all of the registered voters, and I'm a retired election official. I did this for 18 years. All of the registered voters will receive a new voter card that tells them their new district, its lines, where they are. And everybody who wants to run for office can run under these new districts. It'll be Congress, it will be state legislature, and it will be fantastic. And we're pretty excited about this because our state has been on much too long been under the crushed heel oppression of one party rule. It's not been at all legitimate. And I would say, if you happen to see the documentary Slay the Dragon, which purports to tell our story, don't believe it. It's unfortunately a Hollywood production. It doesn't really tell how we actually did it. I've written a very detailed instructional manual for people who want to conduct a successful voter campaign. It's very difficult to do this. You can't just jump into it knowing nothing. But don't believe what a documentary tells you. They try to mythologize this and make it look like one charismatic person did this. That's not how it happened. It was 5,000 very amazing volunteers. Thank you, Harvey.
That's fantastic. So can you post a link to the document that you wrote about this? Oh, you're muted. Wait, you're muted.
I don't want the wrong people to get hold of my detailed instructional manual. I'm only going to give it to people who are the real deal.
So how can real deal people get a hold of you to get it?
Jan@BENDOR.org.
Okay, Jan@BENDOR.org. So this is a monumental victory that's completely under the radar screen. This was a constitutional amendment, right? So you have to do this by constitutional amendment, because I believe I read, I don't know detail, but I believe I read somewhere that they passed an anti-gerrymandering thing in Missouri, but it was not a constitutional amendment, and the gerrymandered legislature stepped in and really fucked it over. So, but this is it. This is the real McCoy. Now, we have had a districting commission in California dating to the early 2000s that is pretty well liked, and there's also one in Iowa. I don't know the backstory. I do know in California, Arnold Schwarzenegger played a big role in winning it, partly because the gerrymandering in California was done by the Democrats, and he was a Republican. But the commission in California is pretty well viewed as a success. Arnold was involved somehow in Michigan too, right? Isn't that right, Jan?
Well, he came in at the end of our ballot campaign, our election campaign, and got voters out to vote for it. And that was very helpful. His son at the time was a student at the University of Michigan, so that got a big rally. So it was all about getting young voters to vote for this. We were very happy that he did that. We were happy at a number of other celebrity supporters. But I have to say, you have to be winning before you get any support. You know, most of the money that we got arrived after Election Day.
Wow.
And we put ourselves out in you know, gambling land to buy TV and radio And who knows what would have happened if we hadn't been able to cover those bills. They don't give you money up front when you really need it. That's the serious problem with the funding for these grassroots campaigns, is everybody waits until the last minute until they figure you're winning, and then they give you $6 million. Well, thanks a lot.
Right. Well, this couldn't be bigger, and this is something everybody in our various states. Hetty, you're in Minnesota. Anna, Georgia, you're in Massachusetts. I mean, these are and Ray in Georgia. I mean, these are victories we have to win state by state. I mean, there's no federal control over gerrymandering, at least not right now.
Nothing.
And you can't, like I say, you got to win a constitutional amendment, because you can win a referendum and pass a law, and then the legislature will jump in and override it.
Yeah, we've had the same problem in Michigan, and that's why it has to be really locked down. I would say you've got to have some very good legal volunteers to make sure your proposal is watertight. We had 50 volunteer attorneys. I was on the committee. I'm one of only 2 members that is not an attorney. I'm an elected official. And we made sure that they could not undermine us the way they had undermined our Civil Service Commission, our Civil Rights Commission. They find ways to undermine and partisanize these supposedly nonpartisan commissions. And we really defended this well. I think if you look at the language, it'll make your brain hurt, but that's what we had to do.
Well, that's what the marijuana is for that we were talking about.
No,
does anybody have anything they want to ask Jan? I mean, this is, it doesn't get more important than this. Were you involved with any organizations like the NAACP or any of the big national groups?
We had a great deal of support from the Michigan chapters of these groups, but we could not accept money from any national partisan group because we were staying squeaky clean. And that's, I think, the secret of our 61% win, was that we were absolutely nonpartisan. We took no money from any partisan group.
Unbelievable. It's fantastic what you did. Absolutely fantastic. And it really has to be a template for the rest of the country. I mean, it's made a huge difference in California politics. We've actually had competitive districts for congressional seats. What a concept.
What a thought.
You know? And I mean, the assembly is totally dominated in California by the Democrats, but that's because the Republicans are so lame. But not that the Democrats are so great, but you know, that's the reality. Does anybody want to ask Jan anything about this? I mean, it's absolutely spectacular. Hetty?
Hetty has a question. What is the demographic breakdown of that commission, the 13 folks?
Hey, Hetty, I would not be able to tell you because they're only allowed to be picked at random by their self-reported partisanship. And but we worked really hard to get a huge variety of people to apply. And I think the one thing that we failed at, much as we tried, was we didn't get enough people of color to apply, not as many as we had hoped.
How are they chosen? How are the commissioners chosen?
Random draw.
No. Really?
And the parties at the first 200 random draw, the parties could exercise comparable to a jury, you know, peremptory rejections. But once they exercised those, that was it. They couldn't take anybody else out of the pool.
And how many? How long are the terms?
They're there until the next redistricting. They're there for 10 years.
Wow, mind-boggling. Justin LeBlanc, and then I think we'll move on. Justin.
So, Ms. BENDOR, I'm curious what other reform like to be seen brought in by this model, including maybe possibly voting method?
I couldn't understand your question because your
He wants to know,
audio.
can you, do they talk about voting methods also on this commission, or is it strictly districting?
It's strictly redistricting. I'm head of an organization that's working on a lot of the other election issues, but this was not included.
Okay, really amazing.
Harvey,
Yes, Pete, real quick. Pete, you're muted now. Hold on, Pete, you're muted.
how about here?
Yeah,
Can you
good.
hear me
Okay.
now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi,
Okay,
Pete.
great. Yeah, Jan, how are you? I just wanted to thank you for all your work, and I had two quick questions. One, what did the Secretary of State convene the commission as he was supposed to on October 15? And two, given that it looks like the federal census data is not going to be available until April 1st at the earliest, do you think the commission will get their plans out as required by law on September 15th for comment? That is, from April 1st to September 15th, it looks like a lot of work has got to get done of next year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, of this year.
Yeah, it's a real crunch, but these people are up for it. They're willing to stay up all night if they have to get it done in time. Everybody is very unhappy at the way the current administration has fucked up the census. And you know, they blame it on COVID, but I really don't think that's the reason they messed it up so badly.
Yeah, but if they wouldn't have messed it up, we might have lost our immigrants. We might not be. So, yeah,
who knows? But I think September 15th is still a viable deadline. Our commissioners are totally dedicated people. They applied for this. They knew what they were getting into. They were well warned. We made sure of that. They're not making a lot of money from this either.
Are they paid? What's the
They're
salary?
paid about $42,000 a year for the year or years in which they are active, which is not a huge amount of money. So I think these people are amazingly dedicated.
Wonderful, fantastic. All right, let's, we need to look at this really closely. This is a huge deal, Jan, and it's definitely a template. I know Joel Siegel is going to be devoting much in the next 4 years to writing these kinds of things. We're all going to need in our own states to look at it. Certainly Minnesota, Massachusetts, other of the more liberal states should be able to take this on. So thank you again, Jan. So we can celebrate that.
I'm glad to help anyone who has questions. I've been advising people around the country, even Puerto Rico, about how to do this. So we can do it. We can all do it.
Wonderful. Well, it'll be fun to do it when DC becomes a state.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jan. I'm going to move on now to Ray McClendon. Ray, do you want to unmute? We're going to go to Georgia for more celebration. We just celebrated Michigan's gerrymandering, the demise of Jim Crow gerrymandering, we hope in Michigan and many other states to follow. Ray, how did you do it in Georgia? And what needs to happen now?
We did it with a lot of help from folks like all of the people on this call. I want to thank everybody for their thoughts and prayers, but beyond that, for also their financial support for people getting on buses and planes and trains and automobiles and coming down to help support. And it really made a difference. We had a tremendous grassroots effort here in Georgia, and it was particularly important in a couple of different categories that I think really made the difference. First of all, it was an amazing, just to give you some stats, it was an amazing runoff that was unprecedented in the history of runoffs in Georgia, where 89.6% of voters who voted in the general election voted in the runoffs. Now, the highest percentage that actually voted in the runoff demographically was African American voters, who came out at almost 92%
Jeez.
of the vote total from the general election. That's just an extraordinary number. Asians came out at 84.1% of their general election total, and Latinos at 78.1%, and whites came out at 89.5%. So that shows you the power of grassroots relational GOTV efforts. That we got a dramatic number of people out. The final piece is that another amazing stat for a runoff election is that over 226,000 people who did not vote in the general election voted in the runoff.
Whoa.
And of that number, over 50% were people of color. So it was an amazing number that came out, and we'll have some time to reflect on what influenced that. But certainly the efforts of getting out, doing localized events, going across the entire state, even in red counties, and getting that vote out of those packets made the difference. So thanks to all of you for your support, your encouragement, and it shows that having a year-round strategy for getting out, working on cultivating the vote and getting out the vote makes an extraordinary difference. And this is something that we want to take forward from here. So thanks again, everybody. We really appreciate it, and we're going to keep it going.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'll open it up in a minute, but there was another group that jumped in for the first time, the Indigenous, Danny Paul and Tatanka Brika. Can you talk to us about your efforts? I know you hooked up with Ray in the middle of all this.
Happy to, Sluggo. First, I just want to say, Ray, what a tremendous job. This may be the first time in our country's history when people of color have come together to rescue the nation at this level. It really is an extraordinary event. And, you know, just very briefly, what we did after communicating, I think, effectively with Ray and other groups down there to divide the labor appropriately, we took responsibility along with other Native American organizations to target the 15,000 registered Native American voters in the state. And we did saturate. So we made many phone calls coming out of Standing Rock. And also we had volunteers across the country, people like yourselves, calling also. But we also, and I did this in my private capacity, the leadership of my organization, Lakota People's Law Project, took time out of our normal work schedules to do a partisan campaign as well. It is not a 501c3 venture, and we teamed up with some other groups and got a mailer out at the last minute to all 15,000 Native voters. So a small drop in the overall ocean that Ray has been chiefly responsible for, but it did make a difference, I think. And you combine that with what happened in places like Arizona during the general and Nevada, where the Native vote made the difference. I think it's arguable that Indigenous people have also really helped to swing this election. So anyway, that's it. Thanks again to all of you for being such an awesome support to this effort.
And we want to congratulate you and the Indigenous community for the incredible work done against the Keystone Pipeline, which we understand Biden is going to cancel. And then we still have the Dakota Pipeline and other stuff to deal with, but that's a huge victory. And congratulations. You won't have to get your head bashed in again on that one.
That's it's a 15-year effort to get KXL shut down. So that is a very huge, big event. Yeah.
We hope that Biden will follow through on that. Tatanka, is there anything you wanted to add? Tatanka Brika, also from the Indigenous? Okay, Ray, you know, what we need to do now is have a template. I mean, this is, as Danny Paul says, this is definitely an unprecedented event in American history. Not only was it that the 2 Senate seats were decided with a grassroots effort, but it was Georgia, for God's sakes. People lose track of the fact that the KKK was reborn in Georgia at Stone Mountain, where there is a stone monument to the KKK. This wasn't like Massachusetts or Minnesota, you know. I mean, this was, for God's sakes, Georgia. And unfortunately, you don't have the referendum or initiative there, but we'll have to find a way to deal with redistricting in Georgia as well.
Well, we are going to have to deal Sluggo with what Jan was talking about. The Atlanta NAACP will be on the forefront of that as we move forward. So we certainly want to consult with folks like Jan so we can figure out how to get ahead of the curve. Now that we've put this coalition together statewide, people are energized and want to continue to work year round, and that certainly gerrymandering and a redistricting commission are some of the things that we want to take a look at, and we'll be reaching out at some point to talk about strategy in Georgia on that point.
Well, we have to remember, in the depths of our concerns about what was going to happen with this election, number one was the problem of the extreme red state legislatures, who may or may not have had the technical legal power to overturn these elections. I mean, in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, we had red legislatures that conceivably could have overturned the Electoral College. And that's all because of gerrymandering. So, you know, this is instructive, and we don't want to face this kind of nightmare again. Mila and then Joel. After Mila had her hand up, and then Joel, please. Mila, go ahead. Mila Reason.
There. Okay. Ray, hi. I've got a quick question for you. Last I heard, there were people reporting to Daniel Blackman that his name, Daniel Blackman's, had not appeared on their ballots. And so I'm wondering if you can update us in terms of that situation.
Sure. Thanks. And that's correct. There have been reports around the state that certain voters complained that Blackman was not on the ballot, and he has been running a website to harvest all of those names and then file a formal complaint with the Secretary of State's office about those irregularities. So that's still an open question on the Public Service Commission race, which many of you know is a very, very important position in the state of Georgia. So that's ongoing.
Well, thank you for raising that, Mila. And we've had Daniel Blackman on. He was running for he was the sort of the third wheel in this runoff election. He was running for a seat on the Georgia Public Service Commission, where they're going to be deciding on the last two nuclear plants in the United States. He seemed to be ahead in the polls, actually. And this phenomenon of distributing ballots where there are conveniently names not on there, we experienced in Ohio 2004. When John Kerry was running for president, there were a large number of absentee ballots that went out in southwestern Ohio without John Kerry's name on it, and he was running for president, for God's sakes. So this is a big deal. Ray, maybe we can have Daniel join us next week and see if we can't get some momentum behind him. He was a major factor in bringing people out to vote in rural Georgia, and we need to give him his due, absolutely. Okay, thank you for that, Marla. I got Joel and then Pete. Okay, Joel and then Pete.
Yeah, hi, happy Martin Luther King holiday, everybody. There's a book that Harvey turned me on to called Rat Fucked.
You can say it, Rat Fucked. We're not censored.
But actually, rat fucked is an historical political term, by the way. It's not used in a way where it's a curse word. There really is a jargon called rat fuck. But if you want to learn about the history of gerrymandering, Ray and I have had extensive conversations about this. Ray, rat fucked really explains how gerrymandering came right out of Reconstruction. It came out of the Obama victory in 2010, where Republicans got together and said, we're going to elect as many people to state legislatures that are Republican, and then change the district so the House will become red. And that's exactly what happened. It wasn't the passage of Obamacare, which the press said it was gerrymandering. But first of all, I want to thank Ray from my heart, because we really met through Reverend Gerald Durley, who is the co-chair of the Justice Action Mobilization Network. That's what I do. That's my job, executive director of it. But I think three things I want to, points I want to make. Number one, I think it was the spirit that Ray had and the NAACP had of a beloved community and solidarity with the grassroots that often the Democratic Party, and I'm not criticizing the Democratic Party, although I criticize the most about every other minute, but not here, is they were able to get people to the polls because of, I think, the personal touch. And I was hoping, Sluggo, that there could be some kind of an article that you could write with Ray. And if Ray, if you know someone else, we have to tell the Georgia story, because it is an amazing story that the majority of Black voters got a Jewish guy and an African-American minister elected in a red state. And it's very amazing to me. And then once we get this article out, I really think there needs to be a book that's published, because there's a formula there. And the formula, I have to say one thing, and then I'm going to close, is one thing that people are forgetting is look who ran. The two people who ran as progressives. And it was the grassroots and knocking on doors. But what the New York Times is saying is that more people came out to vote who were Black and brown, because those who were running for Senate had a message that appealed to younger people and younger people of color. And a lot of times the Democratic Party loses their ass in the midterms because they don't do the Georgia model. They run TV ads. Then they run moderate Republicans as opposed to Democrats. But I was going to ask Ray, what do you think about some of those ideas? Because you were right there on the ground floor.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Thank you for that first, Joel, and for your support and some strategy and foundational issues. And you're absolutely right that the coalition and relational strategy that we created here in Georgia is something that people are calling, especially around the various southern states and battleground states, to try to figure out how to replicate. And I think that what we've done, similar to what Jan has done in Michigan, is we figured out this is a year-round effort. And so coming out of the loss by Stacey Abrams to Kemp, and what happened there, and how he purged over 330,000 voters prior to that election, and she lost by 55,000, we knew we had to do something different. And so we started building this coalition and building this grassroots effort that wouldn't depend on any party or anybody else making sure that the grassroots folks understood why these elections were so important, and get out and have those one-on-one relationships. And that's really what worked. And we can document that. We can show how in the middle, see, you can't expect folks, as an example, to be encouraged and excited about getting out to vote, and they didn't have Christmas dinner for their families. So what did we do? We partnered with food banks, and we did food distributions during a pandemic to get people food to vote. And we got people like Shaquille O'Neal and the rapper activist Common to participate with us in those kind of things to get folks out. So it was a totally different kind of relational approach, while the traditional players were doing ads that were being tuned out. And I think that that's something that has to be done in a lot of these states. You can raise a lot of money and still lose. I mean, we love Jamie Harrison in South Carolina, who's now going to be the new head of the DNC. But the reality is, you raise over $107 million and still lose. A part of that, I firmly believe, has to do with how do you reinvent your innovative strategy for grassroots get out the vote. So we want to help with that, and we want to work with folks like you all to help get that concept and that idea out, so that we can make sure that we change some of these key districts that are becoming more and more polarized, and that the difference is going to be investing in those districts of those voters of color and those minority groups, in order to make the difference, as we can demonstrate happened in Georgia.
Thank you for that. I got to jump in real quickly here. For those of you listening on Progressive Radio Network, on my Green Solartopia Green Power and Wellness show, we're near the hour, the end of the hour. This conversation could go another half hour. And if you want to join us, please go to grassrootsep.org, grassrootsep.org, or Election Protection 2024.org, and go to the Zoom, our upcoming Zoom thing, and get the link, so that you can join us for the last half hour. If you've been with us on PRN, thank you so much, Jesse in New York, and the crew on Progressive Radio Network. We're going to leave you after the hour, but again, this is going to go another half hour, so do join us. Get the link at our website, Election Protection 2024.org. Look in the upcoming Zooms, and there's the link. So in the meantime, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week at the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show. Okay, that's really inspirational,
Harvey?
Ray. And again, Joel's main point is these candidates were actual progressives. They weren't Republicans. What a concept coming from the Democratic Party. Pete Pekarsky, did you want to jump in real quick?
A real quick question, if Ray's still with us, what's the estimate of how many votes didn't have Daniel, how many ballots did not have Daniel Benjamin's name on it?
Daniel Black.
Ray, thank you very much for all of your effort and for the 2 Senate seats.
No, I heard your question, Pete, and
okay.
Right now he's still collating that information. He's reached out to a variety of groups, and he's trying to get a hard number that he can formally submit a complaint on that. So I don't know the number, but I know in a variety of counties, primarily in rural Georgia counties, is where the complaints were coming from, but I don't have a number.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great question, Pete. And so we have 2 bedrock situations that have been laid out for us in very positive terms. We've got a success against Jim Crow gerrymandering in Michigan, and we have 2 of the most important Senate races in the history of the United States, and the transformation of Georgia, for God's sakes. I don't have to elucidate on that, into a very different political climate. I mean, if we can flip Georgia into an actual civilized country, maybe something can actually happen.
And Harvey, if I can just say one final thing,
please.
And it would be no surprise with the success that we had that the Republican-controlled legislature has already been in committee meetings to draft legislation in order to dramatically curtail no excuse absentee balloting. This would include not only curtailing no excuse absentee balloting, but also eliminate drop boxes, require some form of voter ID related to signature verification, and other measures that would be tantamount to voter suppression. As so many of you may not know, this year, odd years are municipal elections. So, and we'll likely still have some remnants of a pandemic going on, even though we have great aspirations for the vaccine. So we'll still be in a situation where we need to protect voters, and that's of no concern to the state legislature. So the NAACP Atlanta is already gearing up to start a major campaign against this legislation, which has not been dropped yet, but will likely be dropped in the next couple of weeks. And so that's our next big battle, is to save at-will absentee balloting in the state of Georgia.
Well, the fact that they're attacking universal hand counted paper ballots indicates to me that we're doing something right and we're on the right track here. I mean, that's clearly at the top of the agenda. Lynn, and then Joel.
I just want to say to Ray, if there's any way we can help Georgia from Michigan, we also passed another constitutional amendment to guarantee the right to a no excuse absentee ballot and a bunch of other things. We'd love to help Georgia. We consider Georgia our sister state.
Well, if we can get access to that, Jan, if you can links in the chat or at the website, that'd be great. We can include that.
It was all on the same 2018 ballot. We were ready for this disaster.
God, good for you. Okay, Lynn Finerman, then Joel Siegel.
Yeah, this is just a really personal small note. I did a lot of postcard writing for registration issues to get people re-registered if they've been taken off the list back in May and June of 2020. And the people we worked with said it was actually Reclaim Our Vote and NAACP, which are wonderful, as Ray well knows. But I just wanted to say that the direction that we could like paint or put stickers on our postcards was really wonderful. And I ended up painting little gold hearts on my postcard. And I think that really makes a difference. I know it sounds really petty and small, but it's actually quite personal. And I think that they throw them away much fewer times if they see that there's some kind of personal thing put on the postcard.
Very good. Very good. Joel Siegel, thank you for that, Lynn. Joel?
Yeah, one thing I am going to work on, I've talked to Ray about this. I'm going to draft a sense of the House, one in the House and one in the Senate, to highlight what's going on in Georgia, because the Republican Party usually does everything in tandem. So they'll pass a bill in Georgia, and then they'll do it in Mississippi, and what I call the new Confederacy, which includes Wisconsin. And and the new Confederacy is very sophisticated because they can't secede from the Union, but what they can do is make sure that Black and brown people and students don't vote. And this is all 100%, this is all about race, and that's it. And but I think that the reason why Congress doesn't step into a lot of voter suppression or election protection is they say, well, that's up to the states, and then the states have to figure out a way to do it on their own. That's not true. There is plenty of space for the federal government to shine the light on Georgia. Because I used to work for the House Judiciary Committee, I'm in touch with the senior staff of Nadler, and I've asked them about holding hearings in the Judiciary Committee about Jim Crow, voter suppression in Georgia. I want to try to get Ray to speak and others, but the question I would ask, this is to you, Harvey, as a professor, as a scholar, what do we do when a state is doing the crazy stuff? Because this is what I know we're supposed to talk about, because I'd like to hear ideas from all these brilliant people on this call. How do we fight Jim Crow bullshit, and excuse my language, in Georgia together? I mean, Ray and Atlanta NAACP, they can only do so much. But anyway, I'll stop there.
Well, look, Harvey, we just had Jan explain this huge victories in Michigan that nobody heard about. Everybody heard about what we did in Georgia. We're obviously doing something right. And I think in the bigger picture, what's going on here is the enfranchisement. It's not re-enfranchisement, it's enfranchisement for the first time of the constituencies of color in this country. And that's what's got the Trump wing of the Republican Party, or what's ever left of the Trump constituency in this country, terrified. This is what's called a demographic tsunami. And you know, when Ray read off the numbers of the percentages of people that got, you know, by ethnic and racial group that got the vote, that's what's going on. And believe me, it involves women too. I mean, we're about to have the first female vice president in our history. I got to relate one story. I heard it, Shirley Chisholm interviewed a long time ago, and they asked her when she was running for president, which did people give her more grief for, being Black or being a woman? And she said it wasn't even close. Being a woman was way more contentious than being a person of color. So this is what we're looking at here. This is a turning point in American and world history that goes really, really deep. So whatever Ray did in Georgia, whatever Jan did in Michigan, it's really worked at the grassroots. And all this rhetoric we've had about grassroots organizing is 100% true. And you know, all the money that the Democrats throw at TV and other media ads is nothing compared to what Ray and Jan did at the grassroots in Georgia and Michigan. So I think that's the route forward. And we know what we got to do now. All right, another fantastic call. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Steve. This was number 36. I do want to, if anybody wants to stay on, we'll cut off the recording. But if any, I know Bob Fitrakis just joined us, and I'd like to get a report from Bob on the lack of turnout for the rally, the armed rally that was scheduled in Ohio. So we will continue. We won't continue to record, but we can just kibitz if anybody wants to stay on about the upcoming inauguration and the state rallies that really didn't gel and whatever else. In the meantime, this has been 90 minutes again, our 36th call. I am so proud of these calls and all the great people that come in. And just remember that a lot of key contacts were made on this Zoom meeting that really made a difference in Georgia, that will continue to make a difference in Michigan, Ohio, and all these other things. So I think we can all be very proud of our participation in these calls. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Steve, Joel Siegel, Bob Fitrakis, all the co-conveners of the Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition.
We're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia, Solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia all over God's green world?
But the nuclear plants were built in haste, with too many risks and no place for waste. And so from Seabrook to Shoreham town, we have to shut those new plants down. But
don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia, Solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia all over God's green world?
Now we're fighting wars over oil and gas. No matter who wins, it will not last. The earth is scarred, the planet is warming. Don't you think that all of it's a great big warning?
Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia.